Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom nestled between whispering hills and murmuring streams, there lived a little girl named Isha. And Isha knew a secret. She knew a place where the trees spoke and the moss sang ancient songs older than time. It was called the Forest of Whispering Moss. This forest was like no other. In this wood, emerald green moss carpeted the ground and climbed up the gnarled trunks of ancient oak trees, draping down in thick, soft mats. Every leaf, every twig, every stone was cushioned by a thick layer of moss, and all of it whispered. Yes, the moss here whispered. When the wind passed over the moss, it made the softest, soothing sound like the gentlest sigh. The locals called these sighs whisper words. And the whisper words told stories of the forest, of brave deer and playful sprites, of grumpy trolls and mischievous pixies, even of a princess who stumbled into the woods one day and never came out. All the children in the village loved visiting the whispering moss. They would spend hours lying on the moss, listening to its stories. But Isha loved the forest more than anyone. For her, the moss's stories were like music, each whisper word a note in an endless song. So she would lie on the moss for hours, letting its whispers wash over her until she fell asleep. One day, Isha skipped out into the forest, eager to hear the moss's whispers. But as she reached her favorite oak tree, she noticed something was wrong. The whispers, they were fainter than before. The wind rustled through the leaves, but the moss was silent. Alarmed, Saja rushed home, and that evening she returned to the forest with her parents. But the whispers had vanished. The moss was a tomb of silence. Her heart heavy with worry, Isha stayed close to the moss that night. As darkness fell, she started chanting. She chanted everything she could remember about the forest, about the animals that lived there, even the silly pranks the pixies played. She hoped her words would weave their way into the moss, rousing the forest back to life. But the only response was the hoot of an owl and the distant bark of a dog. Discouraged, but not defeated, Isha slept right there by the moss, determined to bring the forest back to life. But when the first rays of sunlight touched the moss, it was still silent, and then something terrible happened. A small stone rolled nearby, and Isha looked up just in time to see a bird peck at one of the moss-covered branches. Startled, the bird ruffled its feathers and hopped away. And when it did, Isha saw something shocking. The moss on that branch was slightly lighter now, thinner in patches. It looked like the bird had pecked the moss, but how? How could that be? She touched the moss gently and realized with a jolt that the moss wasn't just silent. It was also dying. If the whispers faded completely, the whole forest would die. It would turn into a barren wasteland. The thought terrified her. So that night she returned to the whispering moss, armed with even more stories. She told the moss about a valiant knight who battled a fearsome dragon, about a kind witch who befriended a lonely dwarf, even about a talking tree that lived deep in the forest. But still, the moss remained silent, its emerald green fading to a sickly yellow. As the days passed, the villagers started to panic. Without the moss, the whisper wood seemed lifeless. Farmers worried their crops would fail. Villagers argued amongst themselves. Some said the forest was cursed. Others claimed it was the work of an evil witch. Hopeless, Isha sat on the moss, tears streaming down her face. She had failed. The forest was dying. And then a memory flickered in her mind. Her grandmother, Amma, used to tell her stories about the old days. Stories filled with wonder and magic, tales that brought the ancient world to life. Amma had a big, warm smile and eyes that twinkled like stars. And whenever she told a story, she always ended it with the same words: listen softly. Listen softly, and the world will sing to you. Isha hadn't understood those words when she was little, but now she did. The forest wasn't responding to her words, to her chants. It was listening to her stories. With a surge of hope, Isha began to speak. She told the moss about the birth of the forest, how ancient tree spirits wove the first whispers into existence, about the first animals that wandered in, about the trolls and pixies that made their homes in the moss. She told the moss stories of bravery and kindness, of love and loss, of laughter and tears. All the stories Emma had told her, all the stories the moss had whispered to her, she wove them together into an endless tapestry of sound. As she spoke, the moss started to glow. At first it was faint, like the first blush of dawn, but it grew brighter with every story. By the time Isha finished speaking, the moss was humming. And then she heard it. The softest whisper, like the gentlest sigh. Then another whisper and another, until the entire forest was alive with sound. The moss was singing. The next morning, the forest was alive with birdsong and buzzing insects. Flowers bloomed in every color imaginable, and a family of deer emerged from the trees, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. Overjoyed, Isha raced through the woods, laughing and twirling. She stopped under her favorite oak tree, closed her eyes, and listened. The forest was alive with whispers. A wise old owl hooted softly, and a squirrel chattered from a branch above. A family of field mice squeaked as they scurried past, and a beetle buzzed lazily nearby. Even the leaves rustled with excitement. Isha could have stayed there forever, listening to the forest's whispers, but she knew the villagers would be waiting for her. She ran back to the village, bursting with happiness. She raced through the streets, calling out, the forest is alive." The villagers poured out of their houses, their faces etched with worry. But when they heard Esha's joyful cries, their faces broke into smiles. Together, they all ran to the whispering moss. As they entered the woods, they heard the sound that had been missing for so long, the sound that had almost faded into memory, the soft, sweet whispers of moss. Isha watched as the villagers laughed and danced beneath the trees, their voices mingling with the whispers. She saw the farmer run his calloused hands over a moss-covered stone, a look of pure joy on his face. She watched as children rolled around in the moss, their laughter echoing through the trees, and she smiled. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Isha sat down on a moss-covered log. The forest was alive once more, its whispers filling her heart with joy. And as she listened to the symphony of sounds, she remembered her grandmother's words. "Listen softly, and the world will sing to you." From that day on, the villagers never forgot the importance of listening. They visited the whispering moss every day, sharing stories and laughter, and the moss responded in kind, its whispers growing louder and richer with each passing day. As for Isha, she became the guardian of the whispering moss, ensuring that its whispers would never fade away.